Good morning, folks. So, today I want to talk to you about seeds. Now, you can buy these survival garden heirloom seeds online for about 30 bucks, and they come anywhere from 32 to 54 varieties. One of the things you want to look at is you want to make sure it says heirloom on it, and you also want to look at organic. Okay. Now what I do is I buy these seeds and I freeze the seeds. I keep them in my freezer, and the reason I keep my seeds in my freezer is I don't know if you've heard of it, but there is a seed vault. I believe it's in Switzerland, where all varieties of seeds are kept, and they're kept frozen. And the reason you keep seeds frozen is it stops them from deteriorating. So now is the time for next year that you need to start looking at what kind of seeds you want to get for next year's planting. So yes, you're already looking at your fall winter crops. They should be going in this week. But you want to plan on your spring crops, and you want to plan on your overwinter crops. By that I mean right now is the time when varieties of your garlic needs to go into the ground. This gives them about 2 months to grow, die back, and then next spring they'll come back. So I normally don't worry about my garlic because I harvest a little bit in the spring, and then I leave several plants to grow all year, and I let them go to flower. So my garlic bed is self-sustaining. Okay, I have a specific variety of elephant garlic that I like, and I cultivated it from wild garlic, and so my garlic, I don't even worry about it, right? I just mitigate the soil every fall, add nutrients to the soil that I know the garlic likes, and I just let it go natural, right? Now, when you're thinking about gardens, you need to think about, okay, over the winter I'm going to put in my garlic beds, my garden beds. I'm gonna do everything I need to do while it's colder out. That way the soil is ready to go when I get ready to plant my seeds. If you don't put in your garden beds prior to spring, you need a couple months for your soil, especially if you're using compost, your own compost. You need, like, let's say that you're taking the shavings and the dirt from out of your chicken coop. You need to give that time to burn off. By that I mean that the manure that's in the compost needs to break down. If you're going with straight potting soil, you're going to spend a lot of money, and I recommend that you develop the habit of having a small compost pile in the back corner of your yard somewhere that you rarely use, and things like the stuff coming out of your chicken coop, food scraps, things of this nature, you're going to go take out and put into your compost pile. One of the good things that you can do is if you eat eggs, you can take the shells of the eggs, bake them in the oven for about 35 minutes, and crush them. This is natural calcium. Okay, you can eat it. You can give it to your dogs. You can give it to your chickens, but it's really, really good for your garden. Another thing that's really, really good for your garden, believe it or not, is your old coffee grounds. So whenever you make coffee in the morning and you have the used coffee grounds, you can take those and put them in a bucket, and that's really good to add to your garden beds. Now, don't add just coffee grounds. You want to add other things in there like eggshells, fish guts, things of this nature. And again, you want it to sit for a couple months before you go planting in it, okay? Now, one of the individuals I watch online a lot is Pinball Preparedness. He is the one that actually I got the idea of the coffee grounds from, because he makes something called a coffee tea that you can add to your garden beds. I would really highly suggest that you go and look that up on his channel and watch those videos. Another thing that you can do, especially with seeds, is if you're using organic heirloom seeds. You can't do this if you're just buying regular seeds. Most seeds that you buy that you'll find in the store for 99 cents to, I think they're $1.25 now. They used to be 99 cents. Now they're like $1.25. Cost of the economy, right? Most of those seeds that you can buy that are cheap like that are GMO. In other words, they will not, even if you save the seeds from those plants, they will not produce fruit in the second generation. They won't do it, okay? So always look at getting organic heirloom seeds. Some people say get open pollinated, other people don't. Okay, that is a 50-50 chance. If you get open pollinated, that's a 50-50 chance that those seeds have been compromised with GMO crops. One of the good things that you will find to deter pests, especially when your plants are very young, is to plant around them aromatic type of plants, i.e., if you have, like, let's say, squash, cucumbers, things of this nature that squash bugs love, if you plant around the perimeter of your garden bed things like marigold, garlic, it will help, mint, lavender, it will help mitigate those pests. It's not going to completely eliminate them, but it will help mitigate it. So you'll get fewer pests if you do that. But when you're buying your seeds, I cannot stress this enough. When you're buying your seeds, you want to look at how much room does each plant require. Because a lot of times what happens is you get this idea, hey, I have a 12-foot bed, I'm going to put in 20 varieties of this. Then when the plants start getting bigger, now all of a sudden you've got to go in and you've got to dig out plants because the other plants need the room. So a good rule of thumb for, let's say, tomatoes, tomato plants can get up to 8 foot tall. You want to look at how big does this variety get, how much does the branches spread out, and go from there. You also want to do this if you're planting fruit trees. Now understand, if you plant fruit trees that are very young, it's going to take 5 to 10 years before you ever see your first fruit, because the first fruits that come on it at about 3 to 4 years are not going to be big enough to be edible. That is just the tree going through its life cycle, and the seeds off of those will not propagate. By that I mean you won't get plants off of that, right? So always try and get, if you're going to grow it from a little sapling, always try and think of how big is this tree going to be when it's full grown. Always look at that, because I've seen and heard of so many people, especially here in my area, who have planted fruit trees. Then the tree roots are so far spread from the actual trunk of the tree that now they have issues because they planted it too close to the fence, or they planted it too close to the house, and now the tree roots are either into the foundation of the house or uprooting the fence. So you want to always plan on, or since I do live in a suburban area, the top of the tree is going into the power lines. So you always want to look at how much room does this tree require. A good rule of thumb that I have found, I plant dwarf trees. Now, dwarf trees will only get 12 to 15 foot tall. And normally they only require about 6 feet from the fence or building or anything of that nature. So a 6 foot circle around where you put the tree, and nothing above it 15 to 18 feet tall. So you definitely want to plan on that, okay? I will say this. I planned fairly well how I wanted to lay out my fruit trees, and I screwed up. And how I screwed up was I planted elderberry. Elderberry does not have a single trunk. Elderberry will spread out 30 feet. I'm having that issue. Okay? So I'm telling you this because I've made the same mistakes, right? I bought garden beds and I thought, oh, I'm going to plant a tomato plant, I'm going to plant a cucumber plant, I'm going to plant a watermelon plant, I'm going to plant carrots, and I planted them all in one bed, And then suddenly I was having to take stuff out because it got too big for the area. So always look at how much room each plant requires. Good example, cucumbers, watermelons, any of your vine plants, sweet potatoes, you know, all of those, your squash, all of those spread out. And they could spread out up to 45 feet from where you plant it if you don't put it on a trellis. Now, I recommend a trellis. Do I have them? No, I don't. Okay? I'm not a professional gardener. Okay? I grow things a little bit here, a little bit there. But I do recommend that if you can, to have a trellis. That helps because then you can use the height in reference to the actual plant. But vining plants take up a lot of room. So you want to look at, between now and March, you want to look at sitting down, figuring out, okay, this is where I'm going to put my garden bed. Get your garden bed put in. And I use the hugelkultur method, which it's a German method. And what it means is, in the bottom, I put down my hardware cloth. Okay. And the reason I put hardware cloth down is moles. So I put down the hardware cloth. On top of that hardware cloth, which is just basically, it's fencing. Okay. It's fencing is what it is. Okay. It's not actual cloth, but that's what they call it. On top of that, I put leaves. I put branches from my yard. You know, when you have a storm come through and you get all these branches and you're like, well, I got to throw those in the trash. No, don't do that. That's the start of your compost. Okay, so you take all those branches, make sure there's no fungus on the branches, and you break them up and put a nice thick layer of those branches and larger logs. And then over top of that, then you put your good compost. And on top of that good compost, you put another layer of leaves. Okay? The leaves just help cut down on weeds. Or you can use mulch. Now, that being said, if you use mulch, you need to be aware that certain mulches are bad for the garden. Okay? You don't want to use anything that's going to destroy your soil. I highly recommend that you use leaves. Okay? Because leaves, when they break down, they're natural mulch and they're easy to come by. Right? But in your leaves now, you want to make sure that you don't get pests that you're burying into the ground, which they love. Okay? Because if you get grubs into your soil, give it up. Right? It's hard to get rid of them if you get them in the soil. Then I go, once I have that set, then I go and I go up to the fish store where you get your fishing and your hunting supplies, and I buy earthworms. And in each garden bed, I put 12 live earthworms. And I let them go to town. They break down the soil for you. and they aerate the soil for you. Now, in the spring, when spring comes, I pull the leaves back and I take my eggshells and any like fish heads, fish scales, fish guts, any of that nature, and I bury them down in the ground into that soil. And I cover it back up. And I let it sit for about 2 to 3 weeks before I plant. Now, I have a tree here in my yard that I call my grandfather tree. And when that grandfather tree buds, I know the frost is done. It never buds until the chance of frosting is completely gone. I don't follow the Farmer's Almanac. I follow what goes on in my property. I suggest you do the same. You observe what's going on in your property. You observe what buds after the first frost or after the last frost. Those plants you want to keep an eye on, because that will tell you in your area and on your property when to plant. I do this because I'm always thinking, what happens if we do not have access to the new Farmer's Almanac? If we don't have access to news, reports on the TV, etc. This is a good way to do it. So I do have the grandfather tree, and I watch that grandfather tree. Now, I hope that this helps a little bit for you if you're thinking about gardening or growing something small. You don't need a big, huge area to grow fruit and to grow food. One of the things that you can do is you can build your own tower garden. By that I mean I took 2-liter bottles, put a straw in either side of the neck of the bottle so that it drains down, stuck that in another 2-liter bottle, filled the 2-liter bottles where the cap is at, filled that up to the top of that neck with gravel, right? Then filled it with good potting soil. Cut a hole in the side of it and planted my seed. This made a perfect herb garden for me. Now, it's only good for a year, maybe 2. And then, the bottle deteriorates and you have to get rid of it, right? But that's a good idea to have, especially if you're in, like, all you have is a small balcony. You can have these little tower garden bottles all around the edge of your balcony, and it works really great. Now, if you do have it on a balcony, I would recommend that you get something to go underneath that, so any excess water that's coming down, you can catch it and not destroy your balcony, right? Common sense, right? But my main focus today is on seeds. You need to start looking now, because now is when the sales are going on. You need to start looking now and start thinking of, okay, next year, what am I going to plant? Where am I going to plant it? And how much am I going to plant? And always thinking ahead of, I'm not going to be able to get seeds in the future from the store because the store ain't going to be there, or the seeds are not going to be available. So you always want to get heirloom seeds at a minimum, heirloom seeds. At a maximum, organic heirloom seeds. And look around your area where you live to see what kind of crops are growing. If you have a lot of corn and soybean crops, I guarantee you that is all GMO. And if you're trying to grow sweet corn and you've got a whole field of GMO corn within an acre of where you're at, you're going to get pollinated by the pollinators with that GMO corn. And that's going to mess you up on being able to save seeds for the next season on that corn. That being said, it's exceptionally hard nowadays to find certain varieties of plants that are not GMO. Corn, 99% of all corn is GMO now. 99%. It's exceptionally expensive to get non-GMO corn. I will say that. Same thing with soybean. Soybean is also highly, I would say at least 75% of all soybean is GMO now. So think on that, and think on what's best for you and your situation. But for small little gardens, little herb garden, you can't go wrong with a small little garden, a little herb garden. Even if you do one that just sits on top of a desk, you can't go wrong with it, right? And don't be scared to try. I mean, everything I'm saying, it sounds like a lot of work, but I started out with just a solo cup. One plant with one solo cup is how I started. And I was so proud of myself for growing that little teeny little basil plant. I was very, very proud of myself for growing that. Okay? So don't be scared to try that, right? And this is a good thing for your kids. If you have kids, it's a good thing to get them connected with nature in an easy way, right? You don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars doing this. You can, like I said, I started with a solo cup. Just a little solo cup, right? And I grew a basil plant, and I got basil off of that basil plant. And then I took it and I put it outside. And I've gotten basil for the last 4 years off of that one little basil plant, because I overwintered it and it came back and it came back and it came back. And unfortunately, I think this year it finally died. Okay, because we had a pretty cold winter, and I think it eventually killed it off. But, it's little things like that. Celebrate your successes. Learn from your failures. Don't let it stop you. Well, I tried that and that didn't work for me, so I gave it up. Okay, so what did you do wrong? And what did you learn from that experience? Always try and learn from any failure that you have so that the next time you're presented with the same situation, you don't do it the same way, right? Um, that's the definition of insanity, by the way, doing the same thing the same way every time and failing, right? You got to change something. So, if you're doing the same thing the same way and expecting different results, you're going to fail every time, right? So learn from it, right? And I hope this helps somebody who's considering it. Um, but yeah, that's what I have for you today, and I have rambled on for 31 minutes, so we're gonna let this go because I got to go into town. You know, I got things I got to do in town today. So, bicycle.